A lot of people listening to this show know how to work hard. They know how to push. They know how to show up for everybody else. But here's the question. Why do so many high-capacity people who look strong on the outside, still feel anxious and disconnected, or like they're constantly fighting themselves on the inside? We all know I've lived that. For years, I thought the answer was more discipline, more grit, more proving, more doing. And while discipline absolutely matters, I've also learned something else. Sometimes the thing holding you back isn't a lack of effort. Sometimes it isn't the programming, or it is the programming that you've never questioned. The stories you've picked up early, or a nervous system that still doesn't feel safe being seen. And if that's true, then maybe growth isn't always about pushing harder. Maybe sometimes it starts with grace. Welcome back to the Self-Leadership Lab, the show built around one core belief. Self-leadership is the practice of governing your inner world so that your outer life reflects your deepest convictions. I'm Bobby Shelton, and on this show, we have real conversations about what actually it takes to lead yourself first, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, so that you can show up with clarity, conviction, and purpose in your world. Today's conversation is going to go deep. I'm joined by Dr. Alena Čandová, author of Grace Over Grit. Her work sits at the intersection of subconscious programming, nervous system regulation, identity, and healing. And she's helping people understand why so many of us stay stuck in patterns of overworking, people-pleasing, anxiety, and self-abandonment, even when we know better. Because sometimes the problem isn't that you're not trying hard enough. Sometimes the real work is learning how to feel safe enough to become who you already know you're meant to be. So Alena, welcome to the Self-Leadership Lab. I want to dive right into it because you wrote a book called Grace Over Grit. And I've spoken on the show a lot of times about grit and the importance of grit and discipline and working harder, but working harder on the right things. But when I saw the title of your book, I was drawn to it like a bug to a light, because I wanted to hear your perspective on this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you developed this concept and this method that you use, and why you think that grace over grit is such an important concept that we need to discuss as a society.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for the great introduction and for having me here. Over the years, I started to realize when I worked with people, guiding them through subconscious repatterning and healing on a deeper level, I started to realize that people, at least here in Western society, have the grit down. They try to be more disciplined. They try to outsmart their patterns. They figure out, or they lean into this logical, rational thinking of understanding, I shouldn't be reacting like this. I shouldn't, these behaviors are not healthy for me. I'll just use more logic and more strategy, and I push harder to get over it. And what that actually does is it forces the nervous system and the subconscious mind, into a deeper protection. And so part of how Grace Over Grit was born was seeing clients struggle and not knowing how to integrate the deep breakthroughs we tapped into in one-on-one sessions, and focusing on, I've improved this. This has been an improvement, but this is still not great. And so there's always been this negativity bias tendency, and so, partially because of my work with my clients, but also because of my own journey, where I started to realize in my experiences, it was deep meditative states, that I can only break through my patterns when I surrender, when I am more compassionate, and when I soften. Then it's like I was able to come out on the other side of the dark tunnel and understand that whatever I was fighting didn't need to be fought at all. It just needed to be embraced, understood, so it could resolve.
So the word subconscious, what does that mean to you in the context of this conversation? Because it's thrown around a lot. And then also maybe go into, the nervous system as well, because I know in our discussions prior to the show, those are both terms that are thrown around quite a bit right now. But just give us your definition of it so that we can, use that throughout this conversation.
For me, it's everything that sits beneath the level of our conscious awareness. Sometimes it may be material that's semi-conscious. It's all of our patterns, thoughts, and behavioral tendencies that are kind of being repeated on autopilot. And so positive things get stored in our subconscious, like, you learn how to tie your shoelaces, or you learn how to drive a car, you learn how to get from your home to your office. So you save energy. Your brain is saving energy this way, right? Like, I don't have to consciously engage anymore because it's memorized in my whole being. But the subconscious programs that I focus on are programs that usually originate way before our prefrontal cortex, our ability to logic and reason and understand life holistically develops. And so that kind of subconscious programs are the programs that we need to bring into our conscious awareness, because we cannot overcome what we are not aware of.
All right, and then give us the nervous system as well, like for the context of this. I know we could talk an hour about what the nervous system is or longer, but just a basic overview of that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because you said that the word subconscious is being thrown around. People know that most of their lives, it's set up to 95% of our automated life habits are driven by the subconscious mind. But nobody actually, or very few people, know how to work with their subconscious. And so the nervous system, for me, it's the bridge. Because if you think about a child, our upbringings, those are the formational years for our subconscious, for our thoughts, for our habits. Because we don't have the understanding, we don't have the prefrontal cortex reasoning developed yet, we feel as children, and that's how we learn. And the feeling happens through the nervous system. So the nervous system is constantly scanning, am I safe, am I in danger, am I safe, am I in danger? And so a lot of the times we may not remember having a difficult childhood, but if our parents were stressed, our nervous system was detecting danger. Something's not quite right. Then the mind would have given it a meaning. In childhood, what often happens is, well, I can't blame my parents, because if they don't have it all together, I am not safe. And so we internalize everything. So I'm feeling this uncertainty, maybe because my parents are stressed, or I'm feeling this overwhelm because my stressed parent just told me off. And I don't understand what it is, and I give it a meaning. And so the nervous system part, and why I call it a bridge to the subconscious, is that ability that we harness through this grace over grit method to come back and connect with the nervous system and the nervous system's language, so we can start decoding these subconscious programs.
Yeah. No, I like your way of thinking and thinking around that. And so often I think that connection's not made, right? Because like I said, there's a lot of talk about the nervous system today and calming it down. And as we were even talking about before we hit record on the show, so much of this is like in the moment. And it sounds like to me, from your definitions and the way you explain it, it can't really be in the moment because it's deeper than that. It's more programmed. Like you might be able to trick it here and there by, breathing, breath exercise, or a state change before you go give a speech, or, do something that makes you nervous at the time. So your grace over grit method is more of a long-term reprogramming of this. Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. And as you just mentioned, there's a lot of awareness or more awareness about the importance of regulating a nervous system. But as you also mentioned, a lot of the times we use those regulation techniques that can be so powerful if they applied in a more structured way. We use these regulation techniques as what I call band-aid. These are emergency techniques. I'm nervous before my speech, so I know I've been told to take deep breaths and calm down. And what happens in those moments often is that we actually use the breath or whatever regulation technique we're using to override that survival energy that's creating that anxiety, for example. And so we override it. In that moment, yes, we are able to access our prefrontal cortex because these regulation techniques are designed just to do that. But then that trigger, that activation, the next time you give speech will come up because we just overrode it, although we were able to present. And so when I teach clients to work with their nervous system, we go beyond this emergency regulation and we actually work on using these regulation techniques to create or build capacity in the nervous system.
Yeah. And a lot of times those Band-Aids, as you call them, they work in the moment, but then 2, 3, 4 hours, maybe days later, you still feel bad. Or the next time, like you said, you speak, it's not addressing the root cause of your problem. It's just, like you said, a Band-Aid on it. And that's what your method, I think, is different than any other methods I've read, is that it takes time to go back and look at the root cause and start healing, over time. Now, granted, you can still use the Band-Aids, but you use them a little more effectively, right? You don't always want to be walking around with a Band-Aid or else the wound will never heal, kind of thing. So talk us through your method. And I know you have like four like categories for your Grace Over Grit method, but let's start diving into that and going one by one, because I think it would be valuable for people to hear like how to do this long-term healing and not the short term. And then we'll give some examples of ways that people can work on this as well throughout the podcast here.
Yeah, of course. So the Grace Over Grit method, I've built it on 4 pillars. And the main or the foundational pillar is the nervous system work. I call it the nervous system mastery, because we're talking about being able to lead ourselves, self-leadership, self-mastery. And so within the pillar of the nervous system mastery, I kind of take people through a number of steps of how to first get familiar with their nervous system and how the nervous system communicates, and how they can start tracking what's happening at the nervous system level, and then how to work with it, how to start actually rewiring it, then just calming it in a moment. And the first step is really just pattern recognition, right? And understanding that the nervous system has one main role, just like the brain, and it's survival, is to protect us. And so within this one role, it tends to either take us to this fight or flight activation, or when the danger has been sustained for long enough, or stress, then it will take us into this immobilization, which is that freeze response. Now, what's interesting is that many, many high achievers today are actually functioning in the intersection of the sympathetic dominance and this freeze. Okay, we call it functional freeze. But there is just enough mobilization for them to keep going. But there is this internal numbness and withdrawal, and life's not fulfilling, and life's harder than they would like it to be. So first we start to understand those two protective states. Is my nervous system, or does my nervous system has the tendency to go into this fight-flight mode? Do I get argumentative? Do I get defensive? Do I get angry or frustrated? Do I have the tendency to overthink or overwork? Or does my nervous system have the tendency to take me more towards that freeze state? Do I procrastinate? Do I feel overwhelmed? I have a long list to do. I know what to do, but I actually don't have the energy to initiate and complete those tasks. Do I get emotionally shut down? Do I feel numb or withdrawn? And so first is just recognizing, okay, these are my behavioral tendencies. And then we talk about the importance of regulating the nervous system on daily basis because we're working with neuroplasticity. And the reason why I structure it in this way before I go on to the next step within the nervous system mastery is because for the next step, we have to cultivate enough capacity within the nervous system, enough regulation to be able to start accessing the next step, which is what we call in neuroscience interoceptive awareness. And it basically means being able to feel what's happening in my body at any given moment. And so basic examples of interoceptive awareness will be, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm tired, I need to sleep. Okay. In this work, the more important examples are, I'm feeling activation, my heart is pounding, or I'm feeling activation, I have a knot in my stomach, or I have a tension in my jaw. And so when we start developing this interoceptive awareness, when we start to befriending the body or befriending our feelings, that's when we can start interrupting our patterns before we actually get hijacked by them. And that's where the transformation begins, really. Oh, I'm feeling early activation, right? I'm not waiting for the behavior. Now I'm recognizing early activation, and I have tools how to work with that activation in a way that actually allows the nervous system to complete that core wound, so we don't have to replay it over and over again. So that's interoceptive awareness. And then the fourth step in nervous system mastery is how to actually allow the nervous system to complete this activation. And we can call it emotional resolution technique. We can call it resolution on a physiological level. We don't even have to talk about emotions so much, because a lot of the times there is this nearly like people are afraid to meet their emotions. And so I explain that emotion is physiological activation in your system. Your nervous system initiated a defense of some sort, and it's either releasing adrenaline, it's maybe if you tend to go into freeze, it's releasing epinephrine, which is like our painkiller on a neurotransmitter level. So if we can hold space for that initiation to complete itself, which means we can hold space for that emotion to complete itself, which usually doesn't take longer than 90 seconds for that physiological process, then we can train the nervous system to realize that we are actually safe now, and that old activation, that core pattern, can start to resolve.
Man, you gave a lot of good information there. So let's start at the beginning, because I have some questions. So you talk about most people have two protective states, so the fight or flight mode, and that they kind of like live in that realm all the time. My understanding from what you said is when we're in that realm or those two states, then we can't allow our bodies to heal, right? It almost sounds like it's going to overtax our nervous system at that time, because it's one or the other. Either, we're winning or we're losing, and then hence the emotional highs, the emotional lows, the procrastination, the burnout, all the other, bad things that we talk about in leadership and personal development these days. Do I have that correct? That living in that state?
Yes.
Okay. And then after, but what you're saying is that, and I agree with you, because even in my own personal journey, those little awareness things. And I think it's important to state that if you're living in this kind of fight or flight all the time, you're probably not going to recognize these little, like for me, a trigger of depression was I would do something with my mouth. Like I would start like twitching my mouth or something. Well, because I'm not looking at myself all day, I didn't know. But my wife picked up on it. And, you talk about this awareness and this analysis. I mean, sometimes when you're in that kind of like heightened, neurological state all the time, you need someone else to come over there. So help me help the listener and me understand like how we can kind of start identifying these kind of little patterns a little bit more. Because I know you touched on it briefly, but can you go a little deeper into that for me?
Yeah, of course. And what you just shared is incredibly important. Like sometimes we need our partner or a friend or a colleague to bring our attention to whatever pattern it is. Hopefully, we are already receptive to that. Hopefully, our nervous system is somewhat regulated enough for us to be able to hear that, because I feel like most of us have been in places where we've been, brought attention to a specific pattern and we just waved it off, and we said, yeah, it's not a problem. And so, aside from the grace, that compassion I talk about, it's also really important to be really curious. I always tell people this is like a detective work. Okay, and so when you understand the 4 steps of the nervous system mastery, and when you regulate daily, because that's going to allow you to actually feel more without your system being hijacked by the unresolved patterns, then you can go deeper. And so initially it may be more obvious, like physical, like some people will clench fists. Some people, it may be tension in the jaw that's very obvious. Some people walk around like this, shoulders all the way up to the ears. And so initially looking for these bigger signals. So even just saying to a partner, like, I'm trying to figure out on my system if there is anything that looks like discomfort or tension, like bring it to my attention because I want to look at it. And then as we observe without judgment and with curiosity and self-compassion, and as we regulate, then we're going to be able to tap into these more hidden signals within the body. And sometimes it will just be like butterflies in my stomach, or a thought that comes in out of nowhere that's disempowering, and being able to just watch that. And initially that's what we have to do. I have so many clients that after their first few sessions, they have this big aha breakthrough, and then they come back and they're like, oh, well, I'm seeing it really clearly now, but I still can't overcome it. And so we say we have to just watch it. No judgment, just curiosity, because the minute you judge it, it goes. And that practice is going to enable, it's nearly like, think about it, that we practicing so our body can trust us again and start sharing more. Because we weren't listening for many, many years. Most of us weren't listening for many years because it wasn't safe.
Yeah. And I think you addressed one of the biggest problems to change, because in our society, if let's say you overreact to a situation, and then I don't know about you, but when I used to get angry, I'd probably feel worse after the anger than I did at whatever angered me at the time, right? Because again, I think it's exactly what you said. My body was there to protect me and said, hey, Bobby, something's wrong here. I'm going to, raise the adrenaline, the endorphins, whatever the right word is for that, the right chemical. And I think what you said, that grace, and this is where it's so important. And I saw this in my own work that I've done on myself, is if you try to fight your feelings, like you said earlier, you've got to be receptive to it. How do you work on people to get receptive? Because I think the natural tendency, especially for me, so I'm assuming most other Americans are the same, is to judge ourselves immediately and not listen to, I hate the word constructive criticism because it has the word criticism in there. Let's just call it constructive input or constructive insight from others. How do you help people work through that? Because I think that's a real blocker to, developing our subconscious, our nervous system, everything we've been talking about.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. And one of the biggest things I feel like people need to understand is that all the bad habits, all the, as we deem them to be bad behaviors, are actually protective patterns. And so if we shift our relationship with that, right? Like I'm trying to I have a tendency to get frustrated in my relationship or whatever it may be, right? For some people, or I have a tendency to I'm just thinking about a client, to get so absorbed by my work, then I overwork. I spend, it takes me until midnight to get off my computer, and then I'm unable to be at home fully present with my family. And so if we judge these patterns, it's going to be really difficult for us to work through them. And so first thing, recognize that these patterns are trying to protect you. They are maladaptive now, but because they were born, for most of these people, for most of us, they were born when we were children. Okay, we cannot reason and understand them logically because that reasoning capacity wasn't there first of all. And so just get curious. Someone just gave me a criticism, constructive criticism or full-on criticism. Can I build the capacity in my own system to be able to stay with the activation my nervous system just initiated, and be curious about the possibility that that criticism maybe that person is maybe trying to help me? Because what do we have to lose? I take a step back. I work with my system. I'm pondering, I'm giving the possibility of there may be help coming my way. Maybe I'm not seeing something that the other person is seeing. If I approach it from the state, later, if I find out it's not true and that person just attacked me, then I can bring wisdom into the conversation rather than immediately shutting down and maybe defending myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that whole idea about being curious, because I think a lot of times we're so programmed because of years and years of doing the same response to everything. We just think it's normal. And I found a real turning point in my journey was when I started asking myself questions. And the questions started getting down to, at first it was like, why am I, doing this way? Or how can I prevent this explosion to happen? Because, the whole start of my whole journey was one day my wife told me I was the angriest person she knew. And I soon realized that was done with love. And it got me thinking that I realized I was the angriest person I knew. So I was like, so immediately the first question is, why am I so angry? And then what's triggering this anger? Like, what are the events? And once I started asking questions versus just accepting whatever happened, because I think a lot of people are on a journey where they want to be better people. I also think a lot of people start that journey like me, where they reached rock bottom for them. And it's a lot harder. So anyone listening today, if you're not at rock bottom, which I pray that you're not, you can start now by asking yourself simple questions, because we all do things every day that we don't like to do, that don't make us feel good, that tire us out or makes us anxious or depressed even. And so I love your whole idea of being curious. And, I think through the pillars of your book, as which I highly recommend everyone read it, because we're only going to scratch the surface today. You talk about so many different things that can affect you. First of all, it's the way you respond to things. It could be the food you eat, the movement you do or don't do. Would it be fair to say that regulation of our nervous system and regulation of our own being is kind of a full-time job for us, but most of us don't even treat it as a part-time job?
It's a lifestyle. Yeah, absolutely.
Like that.
I love that. Because to your point, the further pillars, I do talk about lifestyle and diet, because if we don't support the physiology, if we don't support the nervous system through eating well, if we poison it with processed foods, we will have harder time staying regulated and harder time, therefore, accessing those subconscious patterns so we can resolve them. Yeah, if we don't move, right? Like our body has been designed to move. So if you don't move, and this is interesting as well, because I used to move a lot. Not that I don't move now, but I used exercise as a Band-Aid. Because if I didn't work out till I crawled on my floor, I would have to feel the unresolved energy from my childhood, and that didn't feel great. So I would literally punish myself I would undereat and I would overwork out. And so again, like finding that yin yang balance, that traditional Chinese medicine concept that I love so much. Like, what kind of movement does my body need today? And that again, that ability to tap into and understand what your body needs at any given moment comes through developing this interoceptive awareness, comes through developing this listening to the nervous system's needs. And so, sometimes it will be, I need to go for a run because the nervous system is activated in this fight and flight, and we need to get that energy out. But if we do it consciously, rather than I'm going to run away from it, then we are helping the system to discharge. And other times, if the system dips deeper into this immobilization mode, maybe it's just gentle stretching. And so many of us will override that and say, no, I have to push myself and go to the gym.
Yeah. I laughed when you said that earlier because that was my story too. Now, I came from a place where I weighed 354 pounds. So I needed to do movement to get rid of that. But at the same time, I was chasing demons. I thought if I lost weight, I wouldn't be angry. But it took me a long time to figure this out. I was overtaxing my body so much that it actually made me more angry. And, but had I not started being curious about it, and had I not a lot of people, I'm kind of taking a side to the chart here because it just came in my head, but a lot of people criticize you for taking it to the edge. I think in my case, I had to take it to the edge so I knew where the edge was, and I took it beyond the edge. But fortunately, I was able to see that. And I think most people will, like you did, again, if you do too much of anything, and one of the signs for me was the joy was gone because I'd go out, I love running, and going out for a run became painful. But yet at the same time, I was like, oh, I need to do this because this is going to bring me peace. Well, like if my body's telling me it's hurt, no, that's not the time. It's not bringing me peace. It's bringing me stress of a different flavor that then is just going to make that other stress worse and worse and worse. So in this line, though, I kind of always, because I lived it, I know what it feels like for me. But for the person today, and I know you've worked with hundreds or more, thousands maybe of people in the same boat, what would you encourage people to take that first step? Because it is kind of daunting, right? Like we said, it's a lifestyle, and that probably is scary to some people. But I'm going to say that like a lifestyle, a philosophy, even the way you show up in the world should be our number one purpose. And if you commit to that, you're going to see the results. I tell people all the time, if I could give you a pill to make them feel like I do today versus I did 6 years ago, let's say, everybody in the world would take it. We'd be billionaires, and because it'd be so popular, like Ozempic is today, right? For people, it's just So I know I'm rambling here, but like I guess my point is, you and I are sitting here talking it because we both lived it, and we both see the benefits of it. What do you say for the person today who knows they're not feeling right, but they're scared to take the first step?
What I'm seeing in a lot of people is that they think that the step has to be big. It has to be something big. And so again, if we do too much in a short time, we're gonna relapse. And so as long as you take a step every day, it doesn't matter how small that step is, because you're helping your system to feel safer. You're helping your body, your nervous system to trust you more. And rewiring and deeper awareness stems from that. Okay, I really love how you said if you could give someone a pill, they would take it in an instant. And we are a culture of, no one anymore understands even what the concept of delayed gratification is. We all want results today. But the beauty about taking these small steps for a longer period of time is that there is so much wisdom that comes from that journey. Like for a lot of people, and I'm now reflecting my own journey, if a magic fairy appeared and she would say, okay, I'm gonna snap my fingers and you're gonna be free of most of your programs, because I believe that we're going to be unraveling our programs for a lifetime. And she would snap her fingers and she would transport me into a version of me today. I would go crazy because that state is so different. And I would not understand, it would just be too overwhelming and maybe even not sustainable. And so I always tell people, enjoy the journey, because there's so much wisdom that comes from the time that it takes from you to get from A to B.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And that's why I think your method is one of the best I've read, because your method starts with grace. And I didn't start with grace. In fact, I was 5 years into my journey before I gave myself grace. And I think you're absolutely right. If we snapped a finger, and this is what my concern with like AI and some of the things that are in technology in the world today, for an example, if people need to draw the conclusion here, it's too much too fast. You know, I heard that 95% of the information in the world you can get within a minute on your phone now. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's just overwhelming. Like you said, you would be in a state of shock. And, you know, a lot of people say enjoy the journey. And I think it takes a while to enjoy the journey. But when you do, it's so beneficial. I'll go back to my weight loss example. When I first started working out, I was doing these exercises and the trainer was saying, feel your glutes. And I've said it on the show a lot. People are probably tired of hearing it, but a 350-pound man is not going to feel their glutes until the day you do feel your glutes. And then it's like, oh, but in order to get to that point where I could feel that, I had to do years of repetition. And there were days where it felt like, well, this is nothing. But, you know, you trusted an expert, you trusted everything you read, and, you know, you keep doing the process. And then one day it snaps in and you're like, man, if I hadn't have done this for 2 years, and I know this probably isn't what people want to hear, that it may take time. But like you said, it's incremental. And as coaches, and you know, we always say take small steps, but people don't understand what a small step is. So for those of you listening today, you know, if you make some progress, let's say it's 1%, let's say it's 0.5%, let's say it's 0.10%, whatever it is, that's still progress. You're not gonna, Rome wasn't built in a day. I know that's a common expression, but it probably took us years, because I think all this development you were talking about earlier about the your nervous system and your subconscious and all that, isn't that between like years 3 and 7 before you start even developing? Like don't you have like a 7-year like?
The first 7 years are for sure the most critical, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There's something interesting as well. Like our cognitive, more like a comprehensive cognitive reasoning doesn't actually start to develop until we are about 12. And then the prefrontal cortex is not fully matured until we are about 25 to 28. Okay, so the first 7 years super crucial, because our brains are also operating from a theta brainwave state, which is like the hypnotic state. So we feel everything without understanding what's going on, and then we are basically hypnotized on top of it. And then we develop these distorted beliefs about the world and ourselves. And then when we get to our, adulthood, we try to think our way out of those programs. Okay, so this is why people put in more grit and more willpower and discipline, because it's virtually impossible to think our way out of these deep ingrained programs that are driving our life.
Yeah. Yeah. So if it takes let's just say 25 years for easy math, 25 years to develop your brain and develop who you are, your thinking self, like don't expect to fix it in an hour or one therapy session or one, you know, cognitive function, you know, session, whatever. It's going to take time. And I know that seems like a little bit maybe defeating, but the thing is you got two people right here that you're listening to that have both done it, right? We didn't get into your whole story, but you know, they can read the book and see your story. And I'm sure you've talked about it on other podcasts and everything, but you know, when you're at that depth of low and you can bring yourself up to where we are today, I mean, it should be encouraging to people, and to take that first step. Yeah, I want to dive into it's so much more. I mean, so the whole grit thing again, and we talked about this earlier, that not on this conversation, but earlier today. People still need grit. Would you say people still need grit to make the changes that you're talking about in grace over grit?
Yeah, but it's a healthy, I would say it's a healthier grit. It's a discipline that's aligned, right? It comes from more of alignment than that grit we know that is actually pushing our system deeper into protective mode, and it's judging us and it's saying you're not good enough yet and you did this wrong. And so we, if we just apply, the cotton ball or compassion, we don't have the energy to move forward. So we need to understand, and then also energy to move forward. So grace and grit together, but in an optimal balance, like that discipline of, like those first steps that, some people are about to take, that requires discipline, that requires a little bit of grit. But I just said a little bit, and I kind of like it because it doesn't require them to go and sit on a meditation cushion for 2 hours. It may be 5 minutes, right? And then their mind gets busy, and instead of saying, oh, I can't do this, saying, oh, I did 5 minutes today.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe we need to redefine both of those terms for ourselves when we're making this. Like, what does grace mean? Because grace normally means like ultimate forgiveness, right? It means like complete, absolving of whatever you've done. Well, that's not going to be realistic either. So grace is in the moment, and I think you develop both of them at the same time, right? You start with a little bit of grace, and you start with a little bit of grit, and you build, build, build. And I think grace will build a lot faster than grit, because grit, I've heard this analogy before. It's like sandpaper. There's very different grades of sandpaper. There's some that'll take like the wood, off, and then there's some that just refine it. We'll start off with a little baby sandpaper, just a little bit of grit, because you're just scratching the surface. You're just roughing it up a little bit so you can start doing these reflections and this analysis that you were talking about earlier. And then the grace part, I would say you're not going to hurt yourself if you overdo grace. Not this self-love culture that we've got today. Like don't say, oh, well, today I'm just going to sit on the couch and eat gummy bears and watch TV all day. Not that type of grace, but grace like, hey, look, I'm flawed and I make mistakes, but I'm going to forgive myself for making mistakes. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about forgiveness, about making mistakes too, because that was something, I tell you what, I probably for the first time, it was about 3 weeks ago, I lost my cool. And I let my nervous system get the best of me for a second. But you know what? I immediately was able to forgive myself. And it stood out to me because before I might take an hour or a day to forgive myself, but this was like immediate forgiveness. Like, I don't know. And we're right into the curious thing. So I'd be interested to hear like your take on the forgiveness part so define that a little bit about your thinking about that with all the people you've worked with.
Yeah, and I love that. And again, I feel like forgiveness and accountability should also go hand in hand, like grace and grace. Like, and for me, the forgiveness comes back to that deep understanding of ourselves, that all these patterns that we deem negative, that when they get triggered and when they overtake us, are just parts of ourselves trying to protect us. There is still part of me that hasn't fully healed or is not fully empowered or free, that for some reason got triggered and is trying to protect me. And so can I forgive myself for letting it overtake me? And what is the next thing I can do, right? Like maybe it's visualizing a similar situation in the future, and how do I want to respond next time? Maybe it's if I ended up being in a discussion or argument, maybe it's going and address that other person and apologize and have a deeper conversation than just superficial sorry.
Do you think it's valuable to, once you've identified like negative things that you do in your life, do you think it's positive to practice that and visualize for the next time? So like you've identified, like, let's just say your trigger is somebody cutting you off in traffic and you lose your cool every single time. Do you think before you get into your car that day, you should say, well, this is going to happen and I'm going to pretend like it happened to me and then prepare my response? Do you think things like that are helpful to like preload your nervous system to things that may or may not happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if we do it in conjunction of like working with our nervous system, right? And so what happens and I often tell my clients, like, by you sitting down and visualizing how you would like to respond in the future, you are training your brain and helping it to be prepared. Because what oftentimes happens when we get triggered or hijacked, that famous amygdala hijack, what happens in that moment, the connection to our prefrontal cortex is diminished. So in the moment of that trigger, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. And then I have people say to me, oh my gosh, and then I calm down and it was so obvious and clear that, I would have done it like this, or I would have said that. And so that visualization and that mental rehearsal, I find it to be very important because we are helping our brain, ourselves to step into that next version of ourselves that's more empowered, more free, that's able to address that situation from a different perspective.
Yeah. I even like in situations like that, I like to write it down.
Yes.
Because it slows my brain down enough. It really cements that training into there because, I mean, we're all going to make mistakes. I still do. I'm still a flawed individual. I like what you said earlier that, it's your processes always change throughout your life, or you said something to that effect, because you're always refining it. And I think your situation changes, and the more information you get, the more knowledge you get, even your age. I mean, like, hey, we were talking about movement earlier. Someone in their 70s obviously isn't going to move as much as someone in their 20s. So it's finding that appropriateness and then regulating. And I think when you said earlier, enjoy the process, I think that's the greatest part of my journey, is that I now understand what that means, because now I get to tweak it. And you can say, okay, well, this worked, this didn't. And when something doesn't work, I'm not beating myself up. So maybe I failed in the moment, but I didn't fail in the preceding moments. Like I was able to just reflect it. So a lot of coaches and gurus today are always talking about journaling, but I think if I could put a bow on our conversation, is everything we do, whether it's, grace, grit, journaling, exercise, as long as it's intentional and it's with a purpose, then you're probably on the right track. If you're doing something just because you watched a YouTube video or saw someone else say, hey, this is the latest fad diet, and you talk about this in your book, it's like, yeah, that might have worked for them. And maybe it's something worthy of trying. So you try it with a purpose. But if it doesn't work, stop repeating the effort. Because, I mean, Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity, right? But yet, why do you think in this realm of like being better people, I think we apply that insanity far too often?
Yes, because of that disconnection, that I believe it's because of that disconnection with our system, with our body, right? And so we are not attuned to those signals. This is not working. And when for listeners that might have done some deeper work, when you get to that connection, it will feel like expansion. Oh, this is gonna help. Or it feels like contraction. And sometimes that contraction can come in even in those moments when we are doing something that could be helpful, because there's an initial, oh, this is new. And so learning to listen to the system and catching ourselves earlier before we go insane, and just accepting, right? Like, oh my gosh, okay, so this worked for someone, but it's not working for me. What else can I do? And that's why I outline so many different approaches and techniques in the book. And I encourage people, dance with it. Try everything. write it down. You spoke about journaling. I love that. Write down how it felt when you did the practice. Was it helpful at the end of it? Or did you feel more dysregulated at the end of it? Because to what you just mentioned, we are at different stages all the time. My nervous system can be more in irritated fight and flight mode in some situation, and it can be more in a shutdown. So it's just, again, coming back to, for ourselves to lead ourselves. I love the title of your podcast, Self-Leadership Lab. We have to be connected to ourselves. So pillar 1, nervous system mastery.
Yeah, no, it's I like how you put it, and I can't endorse your book enough. And you know, I've had a lot of great books on this show, but yours is the only one that deals with this kind of problem, and I think it's very holistic. And I encourage all the listeners to go out and get the book. We'll put it in the show notes where you can go find it. But don't do like me. Don't buy it. Don't do the Kindle version. Get a hard copy, because you're gonna want to go back to it. I'm gonna go back and get a copy myself, because this is one that you're gonna want to write in. You're gonna want to tab, because I think it's not a book that you're just gonna read one time, and it's not long, so don't be scared, people. It's very concisely written, but one of the things that I'll close with, and then let you say whatever you want to put a bow on everything. One of the biggest quotes that I got out of your book, it said that your nervous system is the most important pharmacist, constantly shaping the chemistry of both your body and your mind. And I think that's really was my biggest takeaway from the book, because not only have I lived it, but then the way you've explained the science, and you've explained practical, techniques we can use. And then even you give examples of clients of yours in the past that have done that. But I think if we start thinking of our nervous system as a pharmacist, as a healer, and use it how it was intended, that thought alone might be the key to get people moving in the right direction. So comment on that, and then put a bow on anything else you want to say, because I know we've touched a lot of areas today, and I just want you to get us out of here on a good note and give us some encouragement.
Yeah, and I love that you're closing with this, because when I started this professional journey, which was, after being a yoga therapist as a chiropractor, I was seeing this all the time, and people were starting to heal when we clear the interference in their nervous system. And then they started to heal even more when we cleared the interference of emotional baggage, which was stifling the nervous system. And so whatever it is for the listeners, right, we can look at it from a different angle. How can I support my nervous system at any given moment? Is it the food I eat? Am I hydrated enough? Am I getting enough sleep? Do I want to learn to process what's not being processed from the past? Do I want to learn how to allow that physiological activation that is always on a lookout, because it's trying to keep me safe, because whatever past stressful situation wasn't resolved is trying to complete itself? Do I want to gain more capacity to hold myself so I can lead myself? And so there's different gateways into the nervous system, and I talk about all of these in a book. And there's every person will need a different timeline. Every person will need a different entry. A lot of people, unfortunately, come into this deeper work because they hit the rock bottom, and that makes them open. And so even if that's the case, I always encourage people to celebrate the fact that you have awakened to the realization that you are ready, or you would like to do this deeper work. And it's not as scary as people make it sound. There's a lot of talk in the holistic world about doing the shadow work. Well, it's a shadow work if you don't understand how your physiology was wired. And when you do understand, and when you start to work with it in that structured way, then it becomes easier.
Yeah, I love that. And there is no downside to this. If you take anything, so you're more hydrated, you're better nourished, you're more cognitively able to take on your day. I mean, there's no downside to this at all. There's no side effects. So working on yourself, which is, we do that in self-leadership, we do it, on our bodies. I just think we need to do it more because, we take our bodies for granted. Most people treat their cars better than they treat their bodies.
Yes.
And, it's kind of time to wake up. So yeah, you're right. It might seem a little daunting. And like, I think all the dogmatic people out there that try to scare you, be wary of those people because they're either selling something or they want you to feel like theirs is the only way. And like you said, it's each going to be different for each of us. So I know I told you to give you the last word, and I rarely do that to guests. But before we do get out of here, tell people where they can get in touch with you. Of course, we'll put all this stuff so they can find it after the fact as well. But plug yourself a little bit, and I plugged your book for you, but you plug it as well because it is a fantastic body of work. So thank you for writing it, and but go ahead, sell yourself. This is your marketing test.
It's absolute pleasure. The writing of the book was really out of a desire to empower people because, as I said when we chatted before we started to record, we have a manual for everything, but not the most important thing, which is our inner world, like the foundation that our psyche, our behavior sit on. So it was written with that purpose to empower more people, not just the people I directly work with. People can find me on my website, sattvaintegralhealth.com. I chose the name Sattva, by the way. That's from my old yogic path tradition because it means harmony. It means that inner peace and presence. I'm not really much on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, so people can find me on LinkedIn. I post the occasional article there. All the information, though, is on my website. There's a link to the book. There's a link to both of the programs that I provide. There is an online self-guided program for people that don't quite feel like they're ready to dive in deep with me in one-on-one sessions. And then there is a link for people that would like the support and some spotlight on their blind spots.
Yeah, no, that is certainly awesome that you have all those different paths for people to take. Because like you said, the path to healing is going to be different for everyone else. I will leave with one quote and I'll get everyone out of here. You have a quote in your book also that says, "We heal in the presence of another who's not afraid of our pain." So let Alena be that for you, or find someone else who's not afraid of your pain, because when you interact with people, because we've both been on this path, when you interact with people that aren't afraid of your pain, you're going to become less afraid of your own pain and you're going to develop. So make sure you have that accountability partner. Make sure you get the help you need, but start by reading the book and then finding out the way that you can go. So Alena, I want to thank you so much. You've opened my eyes to so many things, both during this conversation and through, reading your book the past couple of weeks. So thank you for your time. And for all of you out there, work on your nervous system. It may be the key to self-leadership. I don't know. There's a lot of things I'm going to be working on too, but if you can guide your inner self, you're going to guide your outer self. And this is a great way to start. Until next time, everyone, have a wonderful week. Thanks for listening.